And this is the kind of things that I do on the weekends between 5 a.m. and 8 a.m. And what this shows is we went across all kinds of different industries, major industries. You got automotive on there, you got chemicals, you got consumable products, pharma, telecom. You also got all the different regions of the world. And in this, if you look through the columns, you're going to see on the far right the size of the companies going up to $1 billion. Now this is for this single unit. This is not the parent company. When we did this survey, we asked them to complete the information for your business unit exclusively that you are doing the S&OP process for, all right? Not the parent company. What you're seeing here is 34 of the respondents are over $1 billion, and this is some of the things that we're going to talk through. And you go through that, there's some smaller ones, but it's the whole gamut here. The answers were fascinating when we started looking at the specifics of what was driving, some of the things that we're seeing on why companies were getting stuck in these early stages. So limiting elements, let's talk through this. People, we asked on the survey and said, of your elements to progress your SIOP, in your opinion, what is the biggest elements? Is it the people where it's the collaboration, the talking in between the functional areas or sites if you're a multiple site location, business unit? Is it your leadership? They're not involved in the process. They're on the outside. They think that's something that's a tactical involvement. I'm not getting involved with it. Is it your business processes? So the amount of meetings that you have for your SIOP? Or is it your technical from the perspective of how you use your data in your ERP system, those processes? Or is it the technology? When I say technology, I'm referring to the capabilities of the ERP system or your databases being a data warehouse, the analytics, or your bolt-on software. Now my question to this group, the reason why we're all here is networking and talking to people. What do you guys think is the top one? And again, these are listed alphabetically. And what percentage of those companies fall into that top one? So what I'd like you to do is just take a couple seconds here. And the whole purpose of a conference is networking, meet some new people. Take about 10 to 15 seconds and think about that. What's the top reason companies are struggling? And what percentage would that be falling into that group? Because you got, again, a largest percentage of this was companies over $1 billion. Take a second, talk to your neighbor, and let me see what you guys come back with some answers. Network, talk to someone. Come on. I want to see what the thoughts are on this. So which one and what percentage? Again, you might get a chance to meet some new people. Got some collaboration going on here. All right, let's get some answers. What do you guys think? People, what percentage? Ballpark. 70%, okay. And again, remember, if it's the top one, it has to be at least 33. If we do the math, hopefully we'll get some supply chain people can do the math. What do you guys got?
People 15, process is 40.
Okay, they're supposed to add up to 100. From a total perspective, it has to at least add up to 100%. So from a grouping, what percentage? So if it's the people, the top one has to be at least 33%. Oh, 50, I'm sorry. Okay. 70%. Okay, let's see what we got here. So what it came out, people, was 48%. Process, 29. Technology, only 23. And again, remember, these are billion-dollar businesses that they're the ones that are hiring the MBAs. They're the ones that have, the resources, the computer systems. They're running SAP, they're running APO. They're the ones that have the money for the consultant. And the biggest problem today is the people and then the process. So when you think about that, change is difficult. A lot of the meetings there was sessions this week on that, where it's very difficult to move that. And technology is at the bottom. This was seen across all industries, all the different, geographic regions and countries. So, us in the States, when you start considering what we got going on right now on leadership and our politics, I'll tell you what, it was hitting our region too, from those kind of examples we saw. All right. So, is all the S&OP actually worth it? The value of this is it is a hard challenge and it is an uphill challenge. So, if you guys had the opportunity on Sunday to attend the Fresh Connection, that was a great one that went through the numbers. Improving the customer service, you can get about 1 to 5% improvement by advancing your SIOP maturity. You can also become more agile. And again, when that happens, your forecast accuracy, the more you can reduce that lead time, the better shape you're going to be, that the accuracy doesn't have to be as precise because you're more reactive. Also, you have that opportunity to respond to promotions, changes in the marketplace. A lot of things can happen and you have opportunities there. 5 to 25%. Also, increase inventory turns. How much money do you have tied up in your global inventory? If you could remove 5 to 25%, what would be those financial advantages? Also, operations and distribution spend. Think about how many times with changeovers or that the forecast was wrong or something happened that there was a communication problem. How much is it going to be able to, advantage is that going to be for you in your operations team for running overtimes, extra lines, hiring extra shifts, or your distribution center, which is shipping out all kind of products with a last chance. They didn't be able to staff their labor and everything like that. So, if you had the opportunity to reduce all these elements by 5%, what would that do to your bottom line in your company? This was a number that was done, this research, this isn't mine. This was done by SAPICS about 2 years ago. They did a paper on this. I have it referenced in my white paper that actually gives the article where this was presented. All right? When we started to develop this, we wanted to look at what are the different stages of maturity. We looked at a lot of different groupings, and what we decided is it didn't apply to what we were seeing in the marketplace, what we were seeing in the businesses, and what I've seen for the last 15 years. So we kind of tweaked the different ones that we saw out there. The first stage is reactive engagement. This is when there's very limited information. Now, what you'll see is that first box, I do have to apologize, it's a little small. In the white paper, it'll go through more detail. But it's broken out into two different sections, internal and external. Those internals, again, inside the four walls or inside your company. And where's the process? External is when you're working with your customers, your suppliers, and also the market conditions. So in that first stage where there's very limited, there's no meetings. You got siloed processes from how they talk to you, you're not sharing that data, and your systems are standalone. You go to a meeting. How many people have gone to a meeting and people will come on reports with either KPIs or just simple numbers as simple as inventory and sales numbers, and they're different values. You'll have finance coming in with one group of numbers, sales coming in with a different group, and supply chain a different group. And they're either different units of measure, different time periods, and the values are all different. So it's a very cumbersome and reactive stage. You go to stage 2, which is speculative planning. This is almost where people are trying to cover their you-know-what. They're going into meetings and people are going after them saying, hey, why are you missing our targets? And what they do is they start talking about, well, they are doing this. That group, their numbers were this figure. And what they do is they start making tools their business process or their technology, it ties in to try to protect themselves, to say, well, this is what they forecasted, this is what we actually sold. Or this is what we said we were going to have in inventory, and they were going to have a plan, and this is what actually happened. And it gets into a very combative situation. So that's stage 2. Then you start moving into stage 3. That's where you start going into the meetings and you talk about we. This is our goal, our plan. And you also have lines of sight and alignment from the numbers. So the business numbers, when you go into those meetings, is coming from one system, one group of processes, and they pull it from one place. And that's a hard stage to get to. What I would like you to do when you go through and you go back to your S&OP meetings, do me a favor, count how many times when people are talking, they use the word they and theirs versus ours and our number, and these are things that we do together. It will give you a lot of insight of where the psyche is for that process at that time and what you have to do to try to start changing that culture. The last stage, proactive foresight. This is where you're looking into the future. You're trying to challenge the organizations, both from their KPIs, their processes, and everything else, to how do we continue to improve and to go beyond. It's not just what is my goal for today or this year, but how do we exceed that, and what do we do to improve the overall process, all right? And that goes for processes and also for technology. That's where you have things that have the capability to do what-ifs, mass updates, and a lot of things into that nature. External. Again, when you start out, the first one, there's hardly any meetings. How many people here are from publicly traded companies? Can I see some hands? When you have this is an interesting point because you're working with this and you have no visibility of what's going on the outside. When you get to stage 2 and you start going to speculative planning with your customers and suppliers, how many times is there a phone call that says, hey, my number 1 A supplier, how are you doing? What's the situation at end of quarter? Can I sell you this big promotion? Do you guys have visibility to those numbers? Did you see anything? Do you have what we refer to as the hockey stick, where it just spikes at the end of the quarter and there was no visibility prior to a day or two prior to it? It's amazing how many companies do that. Again, I've been in Fortune 500, Fortune 100, and you see it all the time. Someone has to hit that number, what was sent out to the marketplace, those financial figures, and they have to achieve it. One of the business units is off, so they're going to make it up somewhere else, and they're going to tell everyone, start dialing for dollars. Okay? Stage 3, collaborative planning. This is where you're going to have a regular, ongoing meeting with your supplier. So there is a regular cycle, the same as was talked on the earlier presentation, where it's a regular monthly cycle. You can't have it with all your suppliers. You can't have it with all your customers. But your A customers and suppliers, there needs to be that regular frequency of meetings that happens, that you're talking about where's their inventory, where's their sales numbers, are they doing promotions, and having that visibility not only for the current month, but that accumulative lead time, that you're talking through those things with your suppliers, and you guys are aligned. It's that collaboration also on the outside, not only on the inside. All right? You're also tying into what's going on in the marketplace. It's not just the suppliers, it's not just the customers, but what's happening in the environment, the economy, commodity pricings, things like that. You've got to be monitoring those. In stage 4, you're taking this to the next level. You're working with those customers, suppliers, and marketing that you have automated, proactive, that try to have sight into that future. What's happening? What's trends going on in the oil price today? What do we see is going on in the future? How should we react prior to it happening? We don't want to be reactive. We want to be proactive. Same thing with our customers and our suppliers, that we're feeding them that downstream information and everyone's kind of in the boat together. All right, we're going to take this to the next step. So, top requirement for advancing S&OP. What do you think it is for people? Anyone have any suggestions? This is a tough group. All right, senior management. It's talked about in a lot of the white papers, it's talked about in a lot of the groups. You've got to have senior management involved. Now there's two things that you'll see here I have on this slide. It's not just involvement. The first part, you've got to have the knowledge of. How many people have senior management they prefer really don't join because the value add is not there? There needs to be training that the senior management team understands what's being done in the S&OP process and what their role is on it. There is a lot of great presentations this session, and you have the opportunity to download the white papers and also the presentation decks to bring back and share with your management teams and to go through that. And I think that's something that added a lot of value. So what we did is when we did that survey, if you can remember back to the 87, a lot of them billion-dollar companies, we asked a couple questions. Over the last 1 to 3 years, how has your SIOP or S&OP KPIs been improving? How have they moved? And there was 4 options. Some decline, it's been stagnant, flat, some progression, or dramatic progress. We also measured them on a secondary dimension, questions far down so they didn't feel there was association to them. And we said, what is the kind of management understanding and support in your S&OP process? And there was weak, medium, and strong. And then we put it into a pivot table and said, okay, what do we get? So when there's weak management knowledge and involvement in the S&OP process, decline and stagnant was 1/3 of the group. That's a big number. When you have 1/3 of the group that is going backwards in their S&OP, it shows how crucial it is to have them involved. Progress, 12%. Again, you can have progress without senior management's involvement. It's harder, but it still can be done. It's not a dependent, yes, no answer, but it does make a difference. When you have strong knowledge and involvement, what happens? 31%. So that 12% jumps up to 31% probability that you're going to see strong progress in your S&OP because they're actively involved. They're holding people accountable. They're making sure that alignment is happening. All right? What about the decline and stagnant? It drops from 32% down to a measly 3%. And I was amazed, I had to laugh. That last respondent, that was that one person, came in probably about 2 weeks ago prior to me coming here, and I had to do the right thing and put that data set in this deck. All right? All right. So the time and volume that senior management's involvement in S&OP is key. It does have a great ROI on it. But what I'm going to do, and I'm going to warn you right now, I've seen it, I've lived it, and I deal with it frequently. You got to make sure your S&OP process is set up properly for the involvement of that senior management. The expectations cannot be that they're involved in every single element, every single part, and down to a SKU level. They will get burnt out, and they're going to say that they don't have the hours in the day to do this. You have to understand that, or they will disengage. And I've seen organizations, when I was at a corporate level with the medical device industry, we were going out and people were trying to pull them into the forecast accuracy meeting. There needs to be those different meetings. In the survey, again, I will not be covering all the questions. There was 35 of them. But one of the ones that we asked was, how many meetings do you have a month? Or the frequency of it. It varied. That even some of them were not doing it monthly. They were only doing it quarterly. Think about that, once a quarter. Do you have time to react when you only get updated information once a quarter? We had other ones on the other side of the spectrum that were meeting more on one business, one segment, more than 10 times per month. Those people are in a lot of meetings. And you could not expect your senior management team to be involved in that much. So you got to see what kind of industry you are in, how many different meetings, how you have it structured, and what the involvement of senior management is. So, typically you want to have that executive SIOP meeting where there's a review process, and they're, breaking down barriers or just making sure everyone's on the same page and holding people accountable for their piece of it. All right. This part, I'm going to go through fairly quick. A lot of this stuff is going to be what you're going to consider common knowledge or just things that you know. But again, what the intent is for SAPICS and myself is to have you guys bring this information back to your S&OP team, back to your management team, and share this information with them. So as we discussed, you got to have the involvement in the senior management team. You got to have transformation, the culture, company culture. That is a hard thing to do. When you have some of the more mature companies that have been around for a long time, and that's why some of the larger companies are seeing the struggles that they are, it's amazing how hard it is to break that culture because, what are the most dangerous words of when you ask a question of why are you doing that? Because we always have. That's a hard thing to break, all right? Continuously development of the staff. You guys are lucky. There's a lot of people that their company will not permit them to go to conferences like this, learn things, and bring things back. So you have an advantage some companies that don't permit. Hold sites, departments, and individuals accountable for their deliverables. How many people, and you'll see this a lot of times for either the supply chain department or if there's a special group, have one person or one group that puts together almost every S&OP deck, no matter what it is. I always find it amazing when you have supply chain people putting together the demand element of the SIOP process. It's seen frequently. These are one of the things that we put together in the survey and we did some questions on. But it is amazing the amount of times. We did, one of the questions that was in there is, what functional areas are involved with your S&OP meetings? And there was times that finance wasn't involved. There was even a couple of them, which I don't know how it's possible, that supply chain wasn't involved. All right? So again, you got to continuously educate and challenge the group. You got to progress. You cannot become stagnant. All right. Technology and processes and technology for the earlier stages. Common few goals. If you were in the session yesterday with Steve, he was talking about metrics and measurements. You cannot have 20, 30 goals going across the whole thing. It has to be a couple to be able to manage it. Or everyone's going, it's a shotgun approach. It's just too much to manage and you can just not handle them accordingly. Implement standard operating procedures. And that is key, that across the different goals and sites. If you have a multiple site business, you got to make sure that they're doing it in similar processes. I've seen a lot of times, whether it's KPIs, financial reports at standard cost versus other costing, and they try rolling it up and it's apples and oranges, and they're trying to say, well, why is this site different than that one? The numbers don't tie out. So you want to make sure that you got standard processes. Also, the system configuration and the data, how that process people put in their data. Have people had problems with the way customer orders go out and is it a requested ship date, deliver date, and other things like that? You'll see where people will put different data sets into the exact same field in a ERP system, and it just really puts some havoc on the S&OP reporting. So don't procrastinate. Start with the basics and keep on building upon them. Technology. You got to make sure you're working on one system of record. It is seen, and again, when I was in Fortune 100, that company, they had, a lot of times they were working on Excel, but the financial team was working on SAP, which blew my mind. You got to be careful where people are using different data sets, standalone reports, planning systems, and everything else. When you go to meetings and people are coming with different numbers, That's going to make it very complex to progress the process, and that's where more time spent on arguing on numbers than it is how do we improve. Analytics, or analyzing system data for improving. You got to use the tools that are available for you. So if the best that you have is Excel and Access today, that's fine, but it should never, ever be freestanding data. You can have analytics that it's exports, but it's coming from your ERP system, and it's just where you're doing exceptional reporting or excess that you can, what's the outliers? What's the problems that are driving these issues? Utilize the functional that's in your system. I've also seen a lot of companies where you go in and these ERP systems are huge. You got to bring in consultants if there is not the knowledge on site, or your IT group does not have the knowledge of the systems of how to do things. There's a lot of companies out there that don't even understand the functionality in their system today. I've even gone to sites in companies I've worked for where supply chain people did not have access to all the applications within it. It was blocked out from them because they used someone else's profile, they set them up, and that person never had access to look at these supply chain elements within the system. And it is unfortunate, but you see that frequently. You'd be amazed how much it's not always greener on the other side of the fence, where you look at it and you say, this can't be happening elsewhere. It does, and it is. All right, so again, start with the basics and continue to progress on them. So, here's another question for you. Let's see if we can get a respondent on this one. You get all the group in the boat together. You're trying to get them to row to a common direction. Who's the guy at the far end facing everyone else? Anyone? Yeah. It's the boss? I'm sorry. Yes. So you want that as the business unit leader. Especially in the early stages, what you're seeing here is that's the person who's fed all the information. Who's feeding it to them? Their direct leadership team. So and again, depending on your size of your company, that could just be the VPs of the different areas. If you're working on a global company, it could be the different geographic regions of the world. But that's going into that. You also have your functions and your sites in the boat together. Your customers, they're a part of this process. If you fail, they're going to fail. And then on the tail end, you got that supplier and its multiple tiers down. You're going to have that wave going through this boat, okay? Now think about this. You've got a goal that you're going through. When are these goals typically set? I don't know about you guys, but right now I'm going through the AOP process of planning my annual operating plan for 2017. We'll probably finish that in the next couple of months, and the goals will be set. They'll be locked in stone, and you're going to achieve that one way or another. Do things happen over 12 months that you just didn't know that were going to come upon you? I'll tell you, if you live in my world, it does it all the time. So what happens? You have competitive pressures. Put some interesting obstacles out there for you. Global economy changes. Right now we're seeing a lot of things going on in the world. All the different geographic regions, things are happening. Commodity pricing. How many people have been impacted by oil prices? I'll tell you, for us, it's actually been an advantage for us. Our PPV has been spectacular. But we're seeing it on the bottom side, starting to go back up. Are you planning for that? Is your group having those discussions of when do you need to change the pricing? If it hits a certain point, when will that happen? Remember, these S&OP processes is not just to balance the quantity these days. It's much more than that. Customer volume changes. That happens frequently. And I'll tell you what, when that thing pops up, that's hell. And it can come out of nowhere. You can lose a big customer unexpected. Or, again, if you don't have those conversations with those customers, it can throw a curveball into your numbers, and you got to figure out how to cover them. Now, where things get real interesting, and I've had this happen, unfortunately, too many times, What happens when you lose that big customer, or one of the other businesses if you're part of a global company and their business unit loses that customer? What happens? Do your goals ever move? Oh, hell. You've got to get everyone in that boat changing directions. What is that process to do it? It is the S&OP process. And you've got to make sure everyone's rowing in the same direction together. If not, you're going to have problems. So is everyone in your S&OP today, all of them, the customers and the suppliers included, rowing in the same direction? Do they know what the expectations are? Now, what I want you to think about is what happens when that doesn't occur. And you come upon that big rock in the front, customer volume updates. I can see it like a picture because I lived it. So, this is a picture of my father. And yes, this was not a Google find. This is an actual picture from my life. I was in that boat with my father. My wife, who's here, Christine, was also in that boat with my father. My brothers, our competitors, were in another boat who beat us bad and then came back and took the picture of our boat. We're along. So what happens? Do you lose credibility with your team, the other functional areas, your customers, your suppliers? What about the cost of the working capital? Do you ever lose inventory, have to scrap things out, have obsolescence because the lack of communication? I'll guarantee for us, it's unfortunate to say, we were in the very early stages of SIOP maturity. We had no processes. Our communication wasn't there. We came around a bend it was a fast-flowing river, and there was a rock in the middle, and we took it sideways, and the water dumped in, and it just wrapped it around that rock. You need to develop a plan. So after this happens, how do you get out of that situation? For us, you can tell, we had a boat that wasn't in all that great of shape, and we had to figure out, we had another mile or two downstream we had to go. How do you get out when you lose that customer, but your annual operating plan says you have to hit this figure? Do you have a backup plan B? Do you have other options? Time to recover. It doesn't happen overnight. Things like this happen, and you got to figure out how do you get out of that situation and get moving. For us, you should have seen us. We were jumping up and down on this boat. We ended up bending it back enough that the three of us could get back in the boat and get to the finish line. It wasn't pretty. That boat wasn't looking good. It wasn't going exactly a straight direction. But we did get to the finish line. Also, it's a small world. You'd be amazed what other people will say about you. The thing that really cracked me up, I had to find this picture. I looked on my computer, I couldn't find this picture. When I knew this presentation was coming up. I got on the phone and said, "Hey, Dad, you know that picture you had hanging on the wall? You used to pick on me about dinner when on the holidays all the time. You still got it?" No, he moved to Florida. He said, "Check with your brother. He might have it." So I called my brother Joe. I said, "Joe, remember the time?" He said, "Yeah, it's still hanging on my wall at home. This picture has been hanging in my family for almost a decade now, and it was hanging on 2 family member walls. You don't know how many times we would hear about this." All right? So in real life, in the last 12 months, I had a supplier who supplies us with some materials for our nylon 6 that we use for our chemical reactors. That supplier issued a force majeure. It was not due to nature. It was not due to anything but inside their own environment. Their reactor went down on the material that they issued. What do you think the salespeople from the other companies who sell that product came visiting me saying? They're consistently falling down. They have unscheduled outage. They will use this as a sales pitch. Your competition will use this against you. Believe me, I see it all the time. And again, will a SIOP or S&OP process make you bulletproof? No. But it gives you a process. It's kind of like the difference between our rowing team that we had in canoes and a professional, or people that do it and do it frequently, have plans. The probability of it happening are a lot less. Okay? All right. Timing. When do you put in third-party software? Any guesses? 3. When you're in collaborative planning, you don't want to put it in prior to that. Why? You don't have alignment. You don't know where your gaps are for the plannings. You don't know where the issues are. You have to make sure that's done when you have a mutual understanding of what your needs are. So get your objectives, get your requirements aligned first. Why? What are the pros in that? You have a strong foundation for your S&OP process because you're now up to that alignment, everyone's on the same page. Improves the system, knowledge, and capabilities. It's very dangerous to try to put in system prior to understanding what the gaps, whether it's back to the very first question, the people or process. If it's people and process, what's going to happen if you don't? Permits cross-functional teams to understand the requirements. Again, get that senior management involved, get the different functional groups involved, make sure they all understand what's needed. All right? What happens when they don't? It's pretty straightforward. Costs go through the ceiling. When I went to Honeywell and I was running their fluorine products, I was their global supply chain director, leader. I ran 7 their chemical plants, tollers, distribution points, all the rail cars, all the ISO containers for a $1 billion business across the globe. That's a big project. And we went from Excel spreadsheets to SAP's APO, okay? So you got to be very careful that you understand what your needs are for it, because it can increase your cost dramatically when you have a lack of understanding of technical knowledge. So what we had to do is map out all our gaps, where we were, what the problems were, and make sure when we talked to the consultants, we had a good understanding of that. Because what's going to happen, your timelines are going to extend, and the costs are going to go up. You're also going to need to overestimate the software capabilities. When you need to select the right software to advance your S&OP process or your company's process, you got to understand what are those needs. Is it forecasting? May not be. Is it inventory optimization, the planning, because of your current ERP system? Could be. Is it just data analytics that you need a strong data warehouse that can give you the right tools and information? Might be. There's all kinds of things out there depending on the industry you're in the business. So again, just make sure you're at the right level, because what you don't want to do, and I learned this when I was at Honeywell, I was, whether you want to call it lucky or at least be able to get through that extremely well. When we did that, we were the first business unit within Honeywell's PMT to ever achieve a scoring of an internal audit of green from the corporate audit team on our S&OP reports and tools. We came in under budget and on time. I actually got multiple awards for that project and the things that we were able to do in that time period. Now it was a 9-month project. I was there for a couple of years, and believe me, it was a lot of hours and a lot of efforts to do that. So why do you strive for stage 4? There has been a number of sessions here over the last couple of days that start talking about that. What's the biggest disruptor in the industry today right now? Technology, without a doubt. It is upsetting so many industries, it's ridiculous. So you start looking at what Amazon's doing to the big box retailers, Uber, and what they are doing to the travel industry, with the taxi cabs and Airbnb. Netflix, what they're doing to the entertainment. Tesla, with what they're doing now with the automotive. It's pretty wild with their technology that they do updates. Instead of doing a recall, bringing cars in, they'll do it online and it just downloads to your car that you don't actually have to take it into the service center. It's amazing what's happening. Things are happening quicker and quicker every year. Think back 10 years. Now, I've been doing this for 15 years, just S&OP. I've been doing supply chain for over 20. Think back 10 years. Where were these companies 10 years ago? and it's happening faster. What's going to happen in the next 5 years, and what's going to happen if your company's not progressing with it? Shorter response times and lead times. There are companies like the Amazons that are no longer talking in days. You know, their prime is 2 days. They're now doing in the States for the mass, big, city areas. They're talking hours. They do delivery in 2-hour service. How's that impact the supply chain? There are multiple tiers through, because they're not going to sit on the inventory. They are expecting those to be more responsive also. Business and customers, their data for you is doubling at least every 2 years. So you need to have the people and the processes in place to handle that. If right now you're struggling with it, just wait for 2 years, it's going to be twice as much. The requirements for a business or for you personally to be successful in supply chain and in S&OP is changing, and it's changing quickly. You need to have a total end-to-end supply chain understanding. You're kind of the center of the wheel, the hub, and a lot of stuff's going through you, and you got to be able to figure out, the expectations of how to manage all those different processes. Plus, with the technology and the data where the information is coming from, you almost have to have an IT background or an analytic background also, or at least people on your team that can support you with that. All right? So is your company going to be able to keep up? That's a question you got to ask yourself. All right. Stage 4. Today, when I look at it, there's not many people, and again, if you want to see raise of hands, how many people today, when you run your scheduling process, whether it's MPS, MRP, an APO process, let the system just run the numbers, and it's very minimal touch. There's human, that's almost nothing. That you release entire production orders, purchase orders, schedule orders. What I've seen, there's not many companies that do that. And the systems that we have, almost every ERP system today has that capability, but it's a lack of confidence in either the people or the process, because the technology is there in almost every ERP system. So you start talking about AI, how long is it going to be prior to being able to handle millions of business decisions on a system that it can almost learn, depending on what's going on? It's already happening. Amazon, all those companies, they're doing a lot of new upcoming fresh companies who are some of your competitors probably are going to be doing it too. But let's take it down and make it more simple. What about for free? If you look at your mobile device and you downloaded the game of chess, for those 32 pieces, there's over 140 million different combinations. And you can play the system as a competitor. I've tried it. I can't beat the advanced model. Most people can't. That's on a free software version that can handle millions of, hey, he moved that there, and I'm going to counter with this. Can we put that into our ERP systems decisions to be able to handle that? Kind of like when Laura talked about the decision map on her presentation yesterday morning. To have all those nodes and make those decisions. The other one, GPS planning. They now have GPS systems. I had to laugh when I went to the airport. My wife and I, we got in the car. We had about a 3-hour drive to Atlanta Airport. They now combine, I don't know if you have what's called Waze here. That app does not only tell you what's the cheapest route, so think of it from dollar perspective, but what's the other ones? And you got to monitor that, and that's the same thing with supply chain. You got to look at what's the path, what's the quickest way to do it, what's the cheapest, and it's going to show you where the police cars are, where there's broken down cars, obstacles in the roads, and all those things. All right. What's going to happen if you don't do that? Your competition is going to do it for you. All right? So this is something you can be passive, but be careful, because someone's going to pass you by. So, as a closing question for you, Where are you in your S&OP process? How much money is being left on the table by where you are, and what can you get out of it? Every company can advance no matter what level you are at, whether you're in an early stage, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, or stage 4. You have an opportunity to improve. It's just you got to figure out, what is needed for that. All right? So, that's what I leave. Any questions for me that I can answer? We do have about a minute and a half before we're done. Any questions? I will be available. There's a break afterwards. If there's questions and you want to come talk to me one-on-one, I'd be more than happy to take those questions. All right, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to present.